My son brought home his future wife. In the kitchen, she cornered me and whispered, "Old man, after you get married, you're going to a nursing home. Your son doesn't want to take care of an unwanted old man anymore." He blinked and confirmed, "Yes, Dad. We need your home more." I smiled. This morning, 33 missed calls and a flood of desperate messages. "My name's Alan. I'm 59 years old and I never thought I'd be the kind of man to write something like this. But here I am sitting in my brother's guest room at 2 in the morning, staring at a half-empty mug of coffee and typing this out on my outdated tablet. Not because I want attention, but because something inside me cracked tonight. Or maybe something finally clicked into place. 15 years ago, my wife, Claire, passed away from cancer. It happened fast. One minute we were planning a weekend trip to the lake, and the next I was holding her hand in a hospice bed, trying to stay strong for our son, Ryan. He was just 15 back then. A boy who needed a mother and got stuck with a shell of a father who tried to play both roles. Ever since that day, I've lived for him. My whole world became about Ryan, what he needed, how he was doing, what would help him smile again. And what did I get in return? Honestly, not much. But I told myself that's what being a parent is. You give, they take. You support, they grow. That's the job. So I swallowed it all. The missed birthdays, the unreturned calls, the borrowed money that never came back. I chalked it all up to love. Ryan is 30 now. He came to visit this past weekend with his fiancée, Brooke. She's 28 and they've been together maybe 8 months. Engaged already. Big red flag? Sure. But I said nothing. I never do. They live a couple of hours away and this was only the 3rd time I'd met her. The first was in a crowded bar where we barely exchanged words. The second was at Thanksgiving over at my brother Calvin's place where she spent most of the evening glued to her phone, occasionally looking up to roll her eyes at family stories. Still, I tried to be welcoming. Ryan seemed happy and that's all that's ever mattered to me. Or so I thought. They arrived Friday night. I'd spent the whole day prepping the guest room, fresh linens, towels, vacuuming, even set out a little welcome basket. I ordered pizza since they said they'd be too tired to go out. I paid for it, of course. Brooke frowned the second she opened the box. "Ugh. Not Domino's," she muttered like I'd committed a crime. "Sorry," I said, smiling. "Small town place. Best crust around here." She didn't respond. Just picked at a breadstick and scrolled through her phone. Saturday morning, I got up early and made breakfast, pancakes, bacon, eggs, the works. Ryan didn't come down until almost 11. Brooke sat at the table and barely touched her plate. "Do you have any avocados?" she asked, like I'd just forgotten the obvious. No, sorry," I replied. She let out a long sigh, the kind that says more than words ever could. I poured myself coffee and pretended not to notice. They spent the rest of the afternoon on the couch watching Netflix on my account while I cleaned the kitchen and started on dinner. Ryan's favorite, homemade lasagna. It's a long process. From scratch sauce, layers, baking, it takes hours. I was in the middle of prepping the cheese mixture when Brooke walked into the kitchen. At first, I thought maybe she was coming in to help. A kind gesture, maybe? I was wrong. She marched up to me, got way too close, and physically shoved me back against the counter. I could smell the bitterness of stale coffee on her breath as she leaned in. "Listen, old man," she said, low and deliberate. "Once we're married, you're out of here. Ryan and I are putting you in the cheapest nursing home we can find. He's tired of carrying dead weight." I stood there stunned. It wasn't even anger at first, just cold shock. My brain struggled to register the words. And that's when I saw him. Ryan. Standing in the doorway watching. Hearing everything. I looked at him, waiting, no, begging for him to say something. Anything. But he just nodded. "It's true, Dad," he said flatly. "We need the house more than you do. My house. The one Claire and I saved for, fought for, loved in. The home where I raised our son, where every corner has a memory. The place I paid off working 2 jobs. And now just like that. I was disposable." I turned back to the stove. "Needs more oregano," I muttered. Stirred the sauce. Didn't say another word. Dinner that night went on like nothing had happened. I served lasagna. I asked about wedding plans. Apparently they're planning a beach wedding in Mexico. "Am I invited?" I asked, half joking. They looked at each other and shrugged. Brooke said something about it being a small ceremony. Ryan avoided eye contact. After dinner, they went out to meet some of Ryan's old high school friends. I stayed behind, loading the dishwasher with trembling hands. When the kitchen was finally quiet, I sat at the table and stared at my reflection in the dark window. And something inside me shifted. It wasn't just the betrayal. It wasn't just the disrespect. It was years, decades of swallowing my pride. Of shrinking myself to make space for others. of putting everyone else's happiness before my own. Ryan never repaid the loans I gave him. He forgot my birthday more times than I can count. And every time he got a new job, a raise, a vacation, I smiled and said, "I'm proud of you, son," and he never once asked how I was doing. But tonight was different. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't break a plate or slam a door. I just opened my tablet, the one Ryan calls ancient, even though it's only 3 years old, and I started making calls. To Calvin, my brother, who's been warning me for years that Ryan's been taking advantage of me. To an old friend from my days working at a law office, someone who still owes me a favor. To my bank. To my neighbor, Marty, who works in real estate. You see, what my son and his fiancée don't realize is that this old man, they think they can shove aside, owns a property that's now worth a small fortune thanks to a new shopping complex being built nearby. Developers have been slipping offers under my door for months. They think I'm clueless, that I'm just some worn-out retiree, easy to manipulate. They're wrong. I've never been the type to seek revenge. I always believed karma would do the work for me, that if I just kept being the better person, eventually things would balance out. But not this time, not this house, not this life. They came back around midnight, laughing loudly. I heard them whispering about me, calling me the fossil, joking about which of my furniture pieces they'd sell first. Brooke giggled and said something about checking if my life insurance was still active. I lay in bed, eyes wide open, listening, planning, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel afraid. I felt awake. Tomorrow morning, I'll serve them breakfast again. I'll smile. I'll hug them goodbye like everything's fine. But they have no idea what's coming. Because this time, I'm not just rolling over. This time, I'm fighting back. That Sunday morning, I made them breakfast. Just like always. Eggs, toast, coffee, no avocados, but Brooke didn't comment this time. I smiled like nothing had happened, like the night before hadn't cracked something open in me that would never quite seal shut again. Ryan seemed relaxed. Brooke wore her usual smug expression, scrolling through her phone while sipping coffee from my favorite mug, the one Claire gave me on our last anniversary. I didn't say a word about it. Just watched them eat, made light conversation, and pretended I hadn't already started tearing down the life they thought they owned. When they left a few hours later, hugs, waves, promises to catch up soon, I closed the door, locked it, and sat in silence for a long time. The house felt colder than usual. Or maybe I just noticed it more now that the fog had lifted. Then I got to work. The first call I made was to Calvin, my older brother. He's been telling me for years that Ryan was using me, not in a malicious way, he'd say, but in a you-let-him kind of way. He was right. Calvin offered his guest room immediately. Said I could stay as long as I needed. He even joked about finally having someone around who could cook a decent meal. I laughed, but I think he knew it wasn't a real laugh. Next, I contacted my old friend Roger. We used to work at a small legal office together back in the early 90s. I handled clerical work, but over a decade there, I picked up more than people realize. Roger now works in a larger firm, and thankfully he remembered everything I did for him back then. He got me in the very next morning. No waiting. No paperwork. Just walked me into an office, sat me down, and listened. We went through everything, my mortgage-free house, my bank accounts, the small retirement fund I never touched, the will I hadn't updated since Claire died. We looked at all the documents, and then Roger leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. "Alan," he said, "you've been way too generous for way too long." He helped me draft a new will. One that doesn't include Ryan. Instead, everything goes into a living trust controlled by Calvin. I still have full rights to the house and assets for as long as I live, but if something happens to me, none of it goes to Ryan. It'll go to Calvin's kids. They call me every holiday. They remember my birthday. They ask about Claire. That afternoon, I went to the bank. Closed my old checking account. Opened a new one. Set up two-factor authentication. Changed all my online passwords. Removed Ryan as my emergency contact and beneficiary. Added Calvin. It was the first time in years I'd done something just for me. I also started digging. Call it curiosity. Call it suspicion. Maybe it was just instinct. I reviewed my online banking history more closely than I ever had. And that's when I noticed the transfers. Small amounts, $150 here, $200 there. Always labeled as loan repayment or monthly allowance. But I never authorized those. Over the course of a year, it added up to more than $6,000. I checked further. The student loans Ryan told me he still needed help with? He graduated 3 years ago. No outstanding balances. Turns out those payments I'd been making were funding vacations Cancun, Vegas, Miami. I saw the pictures on his Instagram. He must have forgotten I even had an account. But Brooke was something else entirely. Calvin's daughter, Rachel, smart, tech-savvy, works in cybersecurity, offered to help. Within a few hours, she found public records I never would have known to search for. Turns out Brooke's been married twice. Both husbands were older, one in his 50s, the other in his early 60s. Both marriages lasted less than 2 years. Both ended with her walking away with significant assets. Property. Savings. One of them even filed for bankruptcy after their divorce. I felt sick. And it didn't stop there. I looked around my house. Claire's jewelry was gone. I thought I misplaced it. A few rare coins from my father's collection? Gone. Even the old watch Claire gave me the Christmas before she passed, the one I swore I'd never take off, wasn't in its usual place. These things didn't just vanish. They've been quietly taking pieces of my life. Piece by piece. That night, back at Calvin's, I didn't sleep. I cleaned his kitchen. Then the bathroom. I reorganized his pantry while listening to an old blues playlist on low volume. I needed something to do with my hands while my mind spun. I kept thinking, how did I let it get this far? But that question didn't matter anymore. The better question was, what was I going to do now? The next morning, I had a locksmith change every lock on my house. Front door, back door, garage, even the basement. Then I scheduled appointments with 3 real estate agents, not to sell, but to confirm something I already suspected. The property's value had skyrocketed. The new shopping center across town and the tech campus being built nearby had turned my sleepy little cul-de-sac into prime real estate. The offers I'd ignored in the mail weren't spam, they were serious. Big money. My boring old house was sitting on gold. But I wasn't selling. Not yet. Instead, I began setting a trap. I invited Ryan and Brooke to dinner the following week. Told them I had some big news to share about my future and wanted to talk to them in person. They agreed eagerly. They probably thought I was going to announce I was moving into a retirement home and handing them the keys. What they didn't know was that I'd invited a few other guests too. Calvin, his wife, Rachel and her husband, my neighbor, Marty, who's known Ryan since he was in diapers, and Brooke's parents. Yes, her parents. The ones she claimed were dead. Turns out they're very much alive, living just a couple of hours away. And they had some questions of their own. But that's a story for the next chapter. I spent the entire day preparing for that dinner. Not just cooking, though I did pull out my famous pot roast recipe, complete with rosemary potatoes and honey-glazed carrots, the same meal I used to make when Ryan had a tough day in middle school. No, I was preparing everything. The house was spotless. I brought out the good dishes, the ones Claire only used for Easter and Christmas. Candles, fresh flowers, even cloth napkins. If I was going to set fire to the fantasy they built, I wanted the table to look perfect. The guests started arriving around 6 p.m. sharp. Calvin and his wife, Grace, came first. Grace gave me that worried look she does when she's not sure whether I'm okay or completely unraveling. I smiled and reassured her. Calvin just patted me on the back like he knew this was long overdue. Next came Rachel and her husband, Drew. Rachel carried her laptop in a tote bag. She'd offered to help document anything if it came to that. I didn't ask questions. Then came Marty, my neighbor of 20 years. He brought his famous pecan pie and a flask of whiskey. In case it gets tense, he winked. But the real wild card? Brooke's parents, Greg and Linda Whitman. They arrived 15 minutes early. They looked normal. Kind. Greg wore a flannel shirt tucked into jeans. Linda carried a small photo album and immediately hugged me like we were old friends. Thank you for reaching out, she said softly. We haven't heard from Brooke in over a year. She ghosted us after borrowing $10,000. For surgery, Greg added. That we later found out never happened. I nodded. You'll hear a lot tonight. Some of it won't be easy. At 6:45, the doorbell rang again. My heart rate spiked. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, smoothed my shirt, and opened the door. Ryan and Brooke stood there, both visibly confused by the extra cars in the driveway. Brooke looked irritated. Ryan just looked wary. What's going on? He asked. I thought we'd have dinner, I said casually. Catch up? Talk about the future. Brooke immediately tried to make an excuse. Oh shoot, I just remembered I've got a work call in an hour. On a Saturday? I asked. She flinched. Ryan glanced at her, then back at me. We'll stay for a bit. They stepped inside. Brooke's eyes swept the living room and froze on the dining room table and more importantly on Greg and Linda sitting there. The blood drained from her face. She looked like someone had slapped her. Linda stood. Hi, sweetheart, she said. It's been a long time. Mom? Brooke croaked. Dad? You told me they were dead, Ryan said suddenly, turning to her. She didn't answer. Just blinked, mouth slightly open, like her brain was trying to reboot. Greg stood too. We need to talk. I don't owe you anything, Brooke snapped, suddenly hostile. You had no right to come here. Ryan looked like he'd been hit with a brick. You lied to me? Brooke turned to me, eyes full of venom. You did this. You're trying to sabotage us. You invited them here. I did, I said calmly. But please, let's all sit. Dinner's ready. Everyone but Brooke sat down. She stood behind her chair like it might explode. I didn't press her. Once we were settled, I took a breath and began. I started with the kitchen confrontation. Her words. Ryan's agreement. Their plan to ship me off and take the house. I watched Ryan's shoulders tighten, his eyes flicker with panic. I laid out the bank transfers I never approved. The missing items from the house. Claire's jewelry. My father's watch. Gone. I talked about the student loan payments I'd been making and the vacations they funded instead. I moved on to Brooke's previous marriages. The property she gained from each one. The patterns. Finally, I looked directly at her. Are you still married to your second husband? Silence. Greg stood up and pulled out a folder from his coat. Here's the marriage certificate. No divorce filing on record. Ryan's jaw dropped. You told me that ended 2 years ago. Brooke started, but nothing came out. You plan to marry me while still married to someone else? Ryan asked, voice cracking. That's when Brooke snapped. You're all insane. This is harassment. You're a controlling freak, Alan. You're obsessed with ruining Ryan's happiness. Then sue me, I replied. But I'd suggest you talk to your actual husband first. She grabbed her purse and stormed out. Slammed the door behind her. And Ryan? He just crumbled. He sank into the chair like someone had pulled the bones out of his body. His face pale, sweat on his forehead. He looked like a little boy again. The one who cried when he scraped his knee, the one who asked me to stay with him until he fell asleep after his mother passed. I didn't know, he whispered. I didn't know any of this. But you knew what she said to me in the kitchen, I said quietly. He covered his face with his hands. I thought she was just joking. I didn't think she meant it. You agreed with her, Ryan. He broke. Completely. Full-on sobbing. The kind that comes from deep in the chest. That raw, helpless kind that only children cry with. He apologized over and over. Promised to change. Begged me to forgive him. And for the first time in my life, I said no. No, Ryan. I can't fix this for you. Not this time. Everyone sat in silence. Even Marty didn't touch his pie. Eventually, Rachel stood and began clearing plates. Grace helped her. Linda and Greg left quietly, still shell-shocked. Calvin stayed with me, helped me load the dishwasher. Ryan sat alone in the living room for another 10 minutes before quietly letting himself out. He didn't say goodbye. I stood in the middle of my kitchen and exhaled. For once, I wasn't shaking. I wasn't questioning myself. I wasn't swallowing my pain. For the first time in my life, I had said what needed to be said and let the consequences fall where they may. It's been 5 days since the dinner. Since I laid everything on the table. The lies, the betrayal, the truth. Since Brooke ran out the door and Ryan sat there sobbing like a little boy. Unraveling in front of a room full of people who had watched him grow up. I haven't heard his voice since he walked out. But my phone? My phone hasn't stopped buzzing. Texts, missed calls, voicemails. Some apologetic. Dad, I'm sorry. I messed up. I didn't know. Some angry. How could you humiliate me like that? Some just desperate. Please call me back. Please. But I haven't answered. Not yet. I spent the last few days at Calvin's, just breathing. I didn't realize how long it had been since I had the space to actually exhale. No one needing something. No phone ringing for just a little help. No manipulation wrapped in obligation. Just me, coffee, and silence. Yesterday, I moved back into my house. New locks. Security system installed. I spent the whole afternoon in the garden. The one Claire used to tend with so much love. I trimmed the bushes, pulled weeds, and started planning what I'll plant this spring. I'm thinking of building a little bench under the oak tree out back. Somewhere to sit, think, heal. Inside, I opened every drawer, every cabinet, cleaned, deep cleaned. Not just to get rid of Brooke's perfume or the tension left behind, but to take back my space. My home. Every drawer that once held her touch now holds mine again. The picture of Claire and me from our 20th anniversary? It's back on the mantle. The note she wrote me, the one I kept tucked in a book all these years? I framed it, and for the first time in ages, I saw my reflection in the hallway mirror and didn't look away. I saw a man with gray in his beard, lines on his face, and tiredness in his eyes, but also something else. Strength, clarity, peace. Ryan, meanwhile, is losing everything. He lost his job. Apparently they were already watching him closely. The missing office funds, falsified expense reports. I can't say I was shocked. His landlord's evicting him. I found out because I was still listed as the lease guarantor. Not anymore. That's been removed. Brooke? According to her parents, she went back to her previous husband. No explanation. No apology. Just vanished. Maybe that's what she does. Burns down one life and steps into another without looking back. And Ryan? He's unraveling. Piece by piece. There was a time, not long ago, when I would have jumped in, called his boss, paid his rent, told him everything would be okay. That's what dads do, right? But I'm not that dad anymore. The truth is, I did him no favors by always fixing his problems. I made it easy for him to never grow up. And now, maybe this is the lesson he needs. I'm not saying I've stopped loving him. I don't think that's possible. I still see that little boy who used to fall asleep on my chest, who asked me once if stars were just heaven holes where love sneaks through. But I also see the man who stood in my kitchen and agreed with a woman who wanted to throw me away like garbage. That contradiction lives in my chest now. I'm not sure it'll ever fully go away, but I've made peace with the weight of it. This morning, Ryan showed up. I saw him through the blinds, sitting on the porch swing, same clothes he wore the night of the dinner. Hair messy, unshaven, face puffy like he hadn't slept, or had cried, or both. He didn't knock, just sat. I watched him for a while. He rocked back and forth, holding his phone, occasionally checking it like maybe I'd text him. But I didn't, and I didn't open the door. Not yet, because for once in my life, I'm not rushing to comfort. I'm not running to patch the wounds I didn't cause. I'm letting someone else sit with discomfort. He needs to, and I need to know that I can say no, and still be okay. Maybe I'll let him in later. Maybe we'll talk. Maybe he'll finally say the things he's been meaning to say, without manipulation, without expectation. But if he doesn't, that's okay too, because I've reclaimed something that took me nearly 60 years to find. Myself. Not the version of me that was always agreeable. Not the version who thought being a good man meant being invisible, quiet, small. But the version who knows his worth. Who protects his peace. Who plants flowers in the spring because they make him happy. Not because someone else asked for them. So here I am, writing this with my son still on the porch. And for once in my life, someone else is waiting on me. Alan.